Happy Friday. Welcome in to the MLB Swing for the Fences show here on Friday, April 26th, talking today's 13-game MLB slate. We got a doozy on our hands, a lot to talk about, and, of course, a fun Friday night of sports in general. Got the NBA playoffs, the haters and losers, of which there are many, man, going. Probably picking against the Wolves tonight. That's fine. That's good with me. But we'll focus on the baseball on this show. And we do have a couple of ticket giveaways. Our man Squid in MLB chat had some big wins recently. He wanted to give away a $121 single entry ticket. I decided to match it. If a member wants to give away one, I'll give away one as well. So two $121 ticket giveaways. You do got to be a member of RPS, and you do got to post over in the live show chat channel on Discord to be eligible. We're just going to pick the two funniest things. Now, I'm partial to Mangone roasts. That's going to be my vote most of the time, but anything could win. And you two got to vote as well. So we'll pick those by the end of the show. We'll talk all these baseball games. Still waiting, by the way, stats on the follow back. I can't. You said last week you were going to give me the follow back. Hasn't happened yet, but we'll see. I'm not even going to go to you for stats. You know what? I'm mad at you. So we're going to go to Mangone first. He's got a brand new grand piano in the background. How you doing today, Mango?
Yeah, I figured I needed a grand piano in my background because you're going to roast me a ton. So I was like, I need to look good while I'm getting roasted, or look rich at least while I'm getting roasted on the show. So, but happy to be here. I traded with Steve Boynton. He's at a wedding tonight. So, the high noons will be flowing in Chicago. It's probably a rooftop wedding with lots of sunshine. But, Steve Boynton's living it up. So I'm here.
Boynton's probably like double the legal limit already, I would guess at this point.
Oh, yeah. Like Boynton definitely shows up with a high noon in his hand.
Yeah.
Sure. He's ready to rock at the wedding, I'm sure. We're ready to rock with basketball and MLB. We're talking MLB here, though, but I'll be on the show getting my basketball stuff all dialed in. So just a heads up on that. But I'm really excited for this slate. MLB slate looks good. I think it's definitely one that we can take advantage of. I ran some stuff to start the show, and I was like, well, these are some bad plays that are being pushed. So I can't wait to not play those plays and play other ones. So I'm very excited for this slate and excited to break it down with you. And, of course, Stats. I don't get to be on shows with Stats too often, even though he hasn't followed you back. And, hey, it took him a little while to follow me back. So he'll get
Whoa. Are you also – he has followed, though. You're not on the unfollow Stats list.
Yeah, but it was one of those things where, like, I hung out with Stats, like, in person in Vegas and San Diego, and I still didn't.
We all play golf together. I thought that might be enough. I was shitty, but,
No, I just followed you. Okay. I just went in there and followed you. It is definitely not a slight. My X game is not all the best. So I'm not too good on following and all that shit. I can't stand it. But I get on there out of necessity just to get my information. So I apologize. I apologize.
Doing things they don't want to do, Stats. So now you're on the list.
Yeah, exactly. But listen, man, this is an interesting slate. We got 13 games. We have some short slates. Now we got a big one here tonight. So and a lot of good pitching, I think, tonight on the slate. Stacks can kind of look all over the place. I think we can win with any one of these stacks tonight. So be interesting to hear you guys take.
I think that's definitely true, especially for hitting, man. I think it's going to be all over the place in terms of ownership. I think the number one thing I would say off the jump here is if you have a team that you think is going to go off, like you're going to get them at low enough ownership, right? Like there's no team I don't think that's going to come in at crazy ownership. So I do think this is a take where you can follow your own intuition, feelings, whatever you want to call it, projections, instead of following the ownership. We do have an early contender from Mr. Daniel Mordorf here. I know Boynton got married because Mangone is here, which is, I think, a pretty solid roast. It doesn't qualify because it's not in the live show chat, but that one did make me laugh. Let's get into these games. First one we'll talk about, of course, we will go by the DraftKings order of games. As always, Oakland and Baltimore. Ross Stripling Corbin Burns on the hill. We do get, I think, the best pitcher. If you throw out ownership and all that stuff, I just think the top projected pitcher, at least in my mind, Corbin Burns on the hill, going up against the Oakland A's, who aren't as bad against right-handed pitching, but are still a very, very strong matchup. Burns so far this year has been, I would say, good, not great. But to me, I do think he is a pitcher that is getting stronger, especially as we see, just so many injuries in baseball. Corbin Burns, to me, stats, he stands strong. We've got a long track record on him on being an elite pitcher and pretty good pitching weather in Baltimore as well. Corbin Burns, my SB1 tonight. Where do you stand stats on Burns? And then I assume you're not on Stripling. I think the bigger question is, how high are you on the Orioles bats? We'll throw it to you first, stats. Burns, Stripling, Athletics, Orioles. What do you got for us?
All right. So, yeah, Burns is definitely going to be the highest owned pitcher on the slate. Now, I was seeing earlier on Saber estimated like 40% ownership, which is a lot on a 13-game slate for a pitcher. So I think, my first inclination is you want to fade Burns here. What was something good in the chat?
I'm just dying of the like an 888. You got a strong entry on the 121 ticket to kick us off. I'm sorry. I normally don't get broken quite that easily, but
what was it? Oh, come on. Oh, it's in our Discord.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna have to go look at that. And I don't want to get broken up while I'm breaking this one down. But yeah, Burns is going to have the highest ownership, I think, by far, maybe twice as high as the second best pitcher or second most owned pitcher on the slate. And again, with 13 games, 26 pitchers on the slate, your instinct here is you want to get under the market or fade it. I think the thing with, if you're single entry, I would always just fade the top pitcher. I think that's not a bad idea. With the way I play MME, I'm going to be right around the market. I'm going to be in that 35 to 40% range on Burns. I think what we talked about earlier with the fact that there's so many stacks out there that could get there, there's no Coors game. The Braves aren't, the Braves are the top projected team, but not the team total's not up there around 6. It's not all that high. So I don't think we're going to have any of these teams that are crazy owned from a stack percentage or ownership level. So I think you can get away with playing someone like Burns. He does have the best matchup. When you look in the betting markets, he's got the highest projected strikeout total. He's projected around 7.7. If you look at Pinnacle, where they're at with their price on his strikeout numbers. So that is the highest total on the day, the highest strikeout total against one of the worst teams in the league. So high likelihood also getting that W. It's always hard to figure that out, but good chance he gets a win, plus the high strikeouts, plus goes deep in this game. So I like Burns here, and I don't mind playing him. Typically, you want to fade that big, chalky pitcher, but at the price 9,800, and like I said, with the fact that you're going to get different just about with every stack that you play. So every stack combo with your if you're playing a 5-2 or 5-3, that combination is going to be very low owned no matter what it is. So you're going to have a good chance of differentiating yourself there. So I don't mind playing Burns. And then you talk about the offense. Yeah, again, Stripling I have no interest in, so I'm not really not going to talk much there. And I do have quite a bit of interest in the Baltimore stacks. I'll be fairly, not crazy heavy on Baltimore, but again, I'm going to be spreading out my stacks quite a bit. I'm not heavy on anyone tonight, and they'll be in the mix right around my top 5, type 6 type of stacks. But again, the difference between my 6 and 7 stack and my number 1 stack, it's going to be minimal. I'm spreading it out today.
Yeah, we don't always agree, stats, but right off the bat, that's kind of the approach that I'm taking to this slate, where I'm interested to hear, Mangone, your opinion on this. But on a slate where we have, 13 games, and the stacks seem pretty clumped, I guess you could say, to me, in terms of like what I expect from them, that makes me more likely to eat the chalk at pitching on a Corbin Burns, who I feel confident in. Sounds like Stats has the same approach to this slate. Where do you stand, Megan? I'm not totally convinced that that's actually the right approach, but it is the like initial intuitive thought that I have, which makes me kind of question in general, right? Because I think I always am a little bit questioning if everyone thinks that same thing. Is it better to go a different direction? But that is my initial inclination, is to load up on Corbin Burns, spread out the stacks like Stats said. What about you, Mangone? Where do you sit on this game? And I mean, I guess we're just kind of already into the game theory on the slate in general, but that's a big part of DFS. So give us your thoughts here.
Yeah, I'm with you guys 100%. I'm very much in agreement that I think I'd much rather eat the Corbin Burns chalk than some of the bat chalk on the slate. Not that the top rated offenses aren't really good, but I just think it's clumped together, like you guys said, where I want to take chances on other offenses. So all we have to do as we dive through the slate is identify that. And for me, it's also hard not to like Corbin Burns against this Oakland team. It feels like Corbin Burns is going to be a wagon, as our guy Steve likes to say, right? He feels like just a wagon for the rest of the year. It feels like it's going to be September, and we're just playing Corbin Burns every single time. Now, also, it's a huge slate, and on a really big slate, you're able to just play the most expensive pitcher and not worry as much. Sometimes on these shorter 6 or 7 game slates,
Sure,
you can make an argument. Is it necessary to? Like, for instance, the big debate yesterday was, do you play that 4K pitcher or do you spend up at your pitching? And if you spent up at your pitching, you had to get cheaper bats. That's conversations we kind of had in the Discord a lot yesterday. And for me on a 13 gamer, it's just really easy to play the expensive pitcher, and then you can get whatever bats that you want because it's 13 games. There's so many different options, especially with how closely it is. So for me, I just want to play Corbin Burns. I just want to move on. We also don't have to worry about Coors Field on this slate as well. So it's just a whole totally different slate than we've seen over the past week or so. So for me, I definitely want to play them. And I do want to consider playing Baltimore. I know this is not a great park for the Orioles, but this is a really great hitting team going up against a pitcher like Ross Stripling, who he could be a disaster at times on the mound, right? I know some of these crafty vets can get through, but he can
there's also not really any great like hitting environments on this entire slate. So
yes, exactly. So that's one thing to compare to. Like if it was a Coors slate, you might think, oh, Coors slate, and like if it was like Chicago wind blown out, you might have an argument with that. I think it's a really good spot to take chances on the Orioles. So I like the Orioles. They're a team that I'm definitely going to be on. And I'm going to be on Corbin Burns for sure. It just seems like a really strong spot. And if you look at this Baltimore lineup too, they lost Holiday. I know he got DFA'd because he, the lights were too bright for him. So we'll go back on him probably in August or July. But for now, we're not going to worry about him. And there's a lot of good bats still in this lineup, right? Like Jordan Westberg is batting 7th. Colton Cowser is batting 8th. I mean, these guys are not going to have ownership down at the bottom here. Cedric Mullins, 4-4. So it's a strong lineup with low on plays left and right, and you can play the 1 through 9. So this Baltimore lineup is going to be a really good one.
Absolutely. Alex here, who is, I think, watching the show every day. We appreciate the support, Alex. By the way, the only one to thank us after every show. Thanks, guys, he says in the chat. After every single show. I appreciate that, most of you freeloaders, you just log out of here. Yeah, but thank you, Alex. I will say this, I'll disagree with this take, saying, Corbin Burns, blowout, preserve him. One of the reasons I was super high on Burns coming into the season, both in season long and DFS, he's pitching on the true free agent contract right now, age 29, has a $15 million contract with the Orioles, but then is just a straight up pure free agent coming into next year. And I think if you watch like Max Scherzer in his prime, maybe not the last couple of years, but the 4 or 5 years before that, he would like refuse to come out of games and just go into like full beast mode where it's like almost like has a trump card over the manager. I kind of think Corbin Burns is like that right now, where I think he's going 6 or 7 innings like almost every game outside of injury or something like that. But a big believer in Corbin Burns here, absolutely, and I do think he is chalk worth eating on the slate. Let's move on to the next game of the night. LA Dodgers, Toronto Blue Jays, Gavin Stone, Chris Bassett, 2 righties on the hill for the Blue Jays and the Dodgers. Total sitting at 9. pretty much a pick 'em in this game. Dodgers are slight favorites. I don't have any super strong takes on this game stats. I think I would lean the Dodgers side between the two, but Chris Bassett isn't really a pitcher I want to pick on in general. So I'll probably won't have, frankly, much from this game. What do we use stats? Dodgers and Blue Jays.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to be in that same boat. There's not going to be a lot of offense and offensive players owned, and these pitchers aren't going to be owned as well. Normally, I would say this is a spot, even against the Dodgers, where maybe you could get a low-owned Bassett who has upside potential. And if you really want to differentiate yourself, I think Sabres got him in that low single-digit 2-3% range, something like that. But I just think on this slate, there's enough pitching to there's going to be some low-owned pitchers that I think are in a better spot than Bassett, and we could get away from him. So I personally don't have any. Stone against Toronto, I'm not touching either. I think I am going to take some of the stacks. I'm going to take just because I think they're both going to be fairly low owned. And while I could see Bassett having a game, he's got that potential to give you some big points, I could also see the Dodgers and or Toronto breaking out. So they're going to be in my stack mix, not going to be high, but I'll have, out of 150, I'll have six or seven stacks, 5-man stacks of each of those, and obviously a few in my secondary stacks on both of them. But yeah, normally we could play a little game theory, I think, with Bassett, but I don't think that's necessary tonight.
Makes total sense to me. I do think we see sometimes these pitchers who are, it's not like Chris Bassett or Gavin Stone are like immune from getting blown up on a start to start basis. We see it all the time with better pitchers than them. Not that they're bad pitchers whatsoever, but I do think, Mangum, we should get both of these stacks pretty low owned. A lot of good hitters on both teams and reasonable price tags as well. So I'm kind of with stats. I would be more apt to stack or play some low owned stacks on these teams than I probably would be to go to the pitchers. What about you, Mangum? Where do you see Bassett, Stone, Dodgers, and Blue Jays?
Yeah, Bassett and Stone are they're not two pitchers that I'm really looking at today. I don't think they make that much sense. I'm with you. I think if I play anyone, it's mainly looking at the Dodgers just because, well, they're the Dodgers, right? They can basically smash on almost any slate. I think you could make a little bit of an argument for some of these Blue Jays on FanDuel, but I don't know. Or sorry, on DraftKings. I was looking at the wrong side. On DraftKings, because some of the value that they provide for their lineup, we got I don't know much about him, DC. Maybe you can tell the people a little about him. Addison Barger, right? When you have a 2K bat like that, and you have other bats like Vladimir Guerrero, and then
he should be a pretty good hitter, I think.
Okay.
Addison Barger.
Yep, and then you have guys like Isaiah Kiner Falefa. Listen, I don't think he's great, but when you have a punt second baseman that you can get to, and then you have a catcher like Danny Johnson, who's at 3.6, which is kind of value at the catcher position, naturally you might get that team if you use projections, right? It's going to push things like that for sure. So I could see getting Toronto, but these are not some of the offenses that I mentioned earlier that I'm dying to get to on this slate, right? We'll talk about it. There'll be other offenses, but for me, not one of my favorites. Dodgers, you can always make a case for. I think there's better top tier spend offenses to play that we'll talk about. And I understand the Toronto thing, but it won't be much of them for me.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Our guy Beanair stats. Any comment to Beanair's girlfriend who says she would take you for a spin?
Mago read an interesting story that happened to me Sunday. I can't get into now, but
you can get into it if you want, John.
No. We got a 13 game slate, but I had a wild Saturday. Let's just put it that way.
It's a way better story than listening to the next game. I'll say that, but that's just my opinion.
It is. Oh. We'll save it for another pod.
Not curious, but maybe if Stats follows me back on Twitter, I'll be able to find out.
I followed you, brother. I folled you, man.
Boston and Chicago next. Shota Imanaga, Cutter Crawford. Another game that is essentially pick 'em via the line and a low total in this one, despite a game in Fenway Park, which obviously is one of the best hitters parks in baseball. But we do have pretty mild temperatures, 50 degrees, winds blowing in, and two pitchers who have pitched pretty damn well on the season. I like the Imanaga side of this one, but I could totally get the Crawford side as well. And I'll be honest, Fenway Park is one of the last places. It's pretty close for me, honestly, on after Coors Field, right? There's just a few parks that you really try to avoid. Fenway is on that short list for me, stats. But I do have interest in these pitchers regardless, because I do have faith in their skills. What about you, stats? Imanaga, Crawford, Red Sox, and Cubs.
Yeah, so I mean, I follow the betting markets. Some people just don't really play the betting markets. They look at projections and other factors, but to me, the betting market's the best projection. And there was steam this morning on this is another Imanaga. Is it? Did I get it right? I'm gonna get. We got it. That was right. Yep. Yeah, we got one of my other good ones coming up later. That unfortunately I had to say 10 times on Sunday, but he got steamed up. He was projected at like 5.4 Ks, and if you look at it now at the sharpest book, it's 6.1 Ks. That's a big jump. So there's a lot of money coming in on the over here on his strikeout total. So I think that's something that we need to pay attention to. So I'm a little higher now on him for that reason. So when I run it with just the flat out projections, just because of his price and where he's at, he's kind of projecting in a similar spot as Crawford is with the numbers. So you're going to wind up getting more probably Crawford at the 8,300. I would kind of bump up Imanaga tonight, and just because of the market and that line move. So I'm really I love those steam moves. Crawford's is projected about 5.4 Ks right now. It's a big differential in the price, but that one kind of jumped out to me. That was a big move, and so I'm just gonna bump his projections up a little bit and try to get a little bit more ownership. What was the I don't have the Saber in front of me what his ownership is, but when I just kind of ran it myself earlier today, I was coming at 15%, but I think I'm going to want to get him up to like that 25% range tonight.
Yeah, I'm seeing just refreshing Saber right now. They've got Imanaga at 2.
He's going to be real low, right?
Yeah, real low.
Yeah, they got him at 2. He's not going to be 2, I don't think,
no.
But
I always make the caveat that these super low owned projected guys almost always come in a little bit higher than the projected ownership. But I mean, I will say Saber's been dialing it in better on the ownership as we kind of get further into the season. I assume I don't have the behind the scenes look there, but I assume they kind of use, these pitchers' past ownerships and new season data and all that stuff. They know what they're doing, obviously, and they've been closer on especially these low-end pitchers than they were earlier. And I mean, sign me up for Imanaga if he's going to be anywhere close to 2%. What about you, Mangone? What do you see here between the Red Sox and the Cubs?
Yeah, so when I ran stuff on DraftKings, and let's look at FanDuel. When I ran it like pretty raw, right? I didn't change too much here. Like I got no Imanaga, right? Like it's just he doesn't really pop that much, right? And
he's like in my opinion, I talked about it a lot yesterday. Yamamoto, I felt was underrated coming into that slate. And I mean, you don't love just like lumping the two Japanese pitchers together, but I do think they're a little bit underrated right now.
Yes, I'm with you. And so I pretty much bumped them almost every single slate. Like I like to digest the content that we got over here and then kind of make some of my own adjustments, right? If guys are over-owned, under-owned, and Imanaga seems like a guy that I would like to adjust here, right? Also, you can make the argument, the Red Sox, they're bad against lefties, right? Imanaga's a lefty, correct? I haven't watched him that much on it. He's a lefty, right, DC?
Yeah.
Yeah. So because of that, I just want to make sure I wasn't reading it wrong, but because of that, it's a great matchup for us, right? Like this is a spot where, sure, the Boston Red Sox, they have a lot of upside as an offense, but when they're going up against a pitcher like Imanaga at his ownership, the upside's too hard to ignore, and it doesn't take that much to get overweight. Feels like a guy that I would like to get at like that, like 10 to 20% range of my ownership and then just call it a day. I think that's a perfect amount to get. I want to be on Imanaga. I think he's a really good play. I also don't want to completely sleep on Cutter Crawford. I talked about him, and I think the Boston Red Sox have a lot of these pitchers. They just have high ceilings and high upsides. I think Tanner Houck is one of those guys too, where you just can't ignore the numbers that they put up. And I do think this Chicago Cubs team, we talked about it, DC, like in July and August, they're going to be an expensive offense and really good. That doesn't mean we can't get a big game from Cutter Crawford. So I'm more interested, I think, in the pitching rather than the hitting here. You could make an argument for some of these Cubs bats at low ownership, but on a 13-game slate, I definitely think I like the pitching way more than the hitting in this game.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is going to sustain, but like Imanaga had pretty incredible success overseas, and at least so far through 21 innings. I mean, our guy has a ERA below 1, and if you could, like we don't know for sure what his long-term MLB results are going to look like, but if you're telling me we can get a pitcher who has massive success on every level, every season that he's ever played, and we can get him at 2% owned. Listen, pitching's tough these days. There's no doubt about it. I got to be interested in Imanaga, so I'm going to be way over the field on him if he comes in anywhere close to that projected ownership. We'll keep it moving, though, to the next game on the slate, Washington and the Miami Marlins, who had Jesus Luzardo scratched from the start. It's looking like a very, very lost season for the Marlins. I believe they're 6-20, something like that. They've, no Luzardo now. Multiple pitchers lost to injury. Sandy Alcantara obviously being one of the big ones. And they're starting Anthony Maldonado here, who I had not heard of until he was announced the starter today. Usually a pretty good sign to take some hitters against him. Not the perfect environment, obviously, in Miami, a pitcher's park there for sure, but I do like the Nationals a little bit here against a pitcher who didn't know he was starting in the major leagues until, 8 hours ago, something like that. So I do like the Marlins, and I like the Nationals, I do like the Nationals. I do like the Marlins a little bit too against Trevor Williams, who I think is pitching over his head. I know he hasn't been amazing so far, but I still think a much worse pitcher than he's shown so far on this young season. So I like the offenses here stats. Not really interested in these pitchers. I know Maldonado is 4K, and he has pitched okay at the AAA level this season, but give me the offenses here either way. Where do you stand on this one, stats?
I think they might just be using Maldonado as an opener. So I don't even know if he's going to go deep in the game. So I don't think he's playable at all. We could double check on that, but that was my impression. I agree with you on the pitching, though. I don't like Williams at all. I think the bats are really interesting. I think you can get some decent stacks here, some decent price. If you want a punt catcher, I think Fortes. I know he's batting 9th, but at 2,100, that's not a bad option if you're looking to save some cash. And I know a lot of people like to do that. But even just playing the bottom of the of this Miami lineup, super cheap if you want to take him in like a 2 or 3 man stack. So I like that, and I like the Washington side as well. I like their catcher also in the 5-hole. I like Ruiz for 3,500, and one of my other Meneses 2,800. Those are going to be guys that I'm all owned in the low teens. So I think we've got some decent bat options, and I can see either one of these teams hitting for us today. And that's why I said earlier, we could save some money on some of these lineups, and that's why playing that chalk burns, I think, is viable here tonight.
Yeah, my only issue is it just seems like we don't see. This is just honestly, I didn't look into the data. It just doesn't seem like we see that many like 10+ run games from teams in Miami, right? Like the ceiling feels a little limited to me. Just playing MLB DFS every day for the last 10 years, but of course it does happen from time to time. What about you, Mangone? Marlins and Nationals.
Yeah, so this is a game where I'm curious if I fight you guys a little bit on, because I don't know about the Marlins here. Like, this team's going to be kind of higher owned than you would think. This game's in Miami. I know DC, we talked about it. Like, there's not a lot of great hitting parks, but I don't know. Are you seeing high ownership on this Marlins team like I am, DC?
I'll pull it up. I mean, we're probably looking at the same data, so I'll believe you.
I mean, it's a 13-game slate. I guess when I'm just running like projections, right? And I run my own stuff, so it's not always going to align with the industry. And sometimes I'm wrong, but is Miami higher?
Slater has Miami at like 10%, pretty much across the board on their hitters.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, and again, it's a 13-game slate. It might be a little bit more spread. For me, I like to be a lot lower on just whatever the higher offenses are for the most part. And I just think Miami's in that conversation today. And it's in Miami. This isn't the greatest hitters park in the world. I know it's not a great hitting slate in general when it comes to the parks, but I think Miami's a better team to be lower on. That's just my personal opinion on it. Washington, one guy I think you just got to be playing right now is CJ Abrams. The dude's been absolutely just on fire. And I don't mind some of these Nationals bats. I think they're definitely in the conversation today. If you look, we talk about Maldonado being an opener, but I don't like the attack bullpen games that much, but I just don't think you can ignore this team because of their prices and the ceilings you have. You got guys like CJ Abrams, who's been crushing the ball. Hubert Ruiz, who's a pretty good play at catcher. Jesse Winker, who's in the 2-hole as a value. You have Joey Gallo, who, yes, Joey Gallo strikes out, but if you're playing for ceilings, you have guys like Joey Gallo who are interesting values that you should not ignore. I didn't even mention Joey Meneses yet. He's a pretty good play. Luis Garcia, I typically don't love second base. Well, Luis Garcia is 3.4K. I mean, Ruiz, who I talked about, is 3.5. I just think there's really good value on the Washington side. So I am a lot higher on Washington, I think, than I am Miami. I'll have to make that adjustment a little bit more when I get off the show. And it's mainly because if you look at both the teams, I just think Miami's getting overowned, and I think Washington is getting underowned, especially if you want to jam a Corbin Burns. You're going to need value on this slate.
Yeah, kind of looking through some of the stuff, I agree with you, Mangone, where I think the Nationals might be a little bit sneaky here against Maldonado. We thought on Wednesday's show, I believe the Marlins had yesterday off, we thought it was going to be Kyle Tyler. I think that was me and Boynton on that show. But he was someone we wanted to target, and it looks like stats, as you mentioned, Maldonado maybe just pitching what do you think? What do you think? 2 or 3 innings for Maldonado?
Maybe 2, something like that.
Yeah. So it should be Tyler in after him to kind of take the bulk of that. And if you watch that show, we were very, very low on Kyle Tyler's chances of success. So this Nationals team does make some sense. And like you said, Mangone, I mean, they're very cheap. Outside of CJ Abrams, all these guys are. Do they have anyone in the lineup over 4K? They don't. Abrams is 5K. Yeah.
They just help make things work, right? And they're not going to be super owned. And again, you're playing for ceilings, and the Nationals have a way better ceiling, I think, than people realize. But of course, I wish this game was in Washington, but I don't know. I think it's a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I'm going to need to dig a little bit more into the Marlin situation, to be honest. But as we talk here, I think the Nationals do make a lot of sense. Specifically, CJ Abrams up near the top of that lineup seems like a really, really strong play on the slate. We'll keep it moving, though. A lot of games to talk about. Obviously, St. Louis and the New York Mets are up next. We've got Miles Mikolas on the hill for the Cardinals. Jose Butto on the hill for the Mets. I'm not really a believer in either of these pitchers. I know some people have some hope for Jose Butto. I'm pretty low on him in general, at least I think relative to the public. But the market does kind of like this game stats, a 7.5 total, pretty low. And 2 pitchers who, at least in theory, could give you 5, 6, 7 innings if things are going well. So I think we might get some ownership on these guys. They're both pretty cheap. Butto coming in at 7,100, and Mikolas, one of the cheapest pitchers on the board at 5,500. I'm kind of a never Miles Mikolas guy, and that'll be true at least for me tonight. But I can at least see the case for him. I'm more likely to go to the offenses here, which seems like it might be a little bit of a contrarian take. Where do you stand on this one? Stats between the Marlins and the Cardinals.
Yeah, I'll probably have more Budo than you will in this one. Yeah, I mean, you look at his last few starts. I mean, you got to kind of give him a pass at the Dodgers. Never an easy place to pitch. Good ballpark to pitch in, but it's not an easy team to pitch against. But the time before that, he was really good for us against Kansas City and had a pretty decent start against Detroit. I just think 7,100. I think the price is right. I'm going to have a decent amount of Budo here, probably 20 to 25%. Now, the Cardinals don't really strike out all that much, but total's real low. Good ballpark to pitch in. So I think the weather's going to be a little chilly in New York as well. So, we're not expecting much as far as runs go. Mikolas, I'm kind of with, I'm not in the never Mikolas camp, but I won't have much at all tonight. And like I said, this is going to be I think it's just going to be a tough hitting environment overall.
For sure.
I'm not real high on the bats, especially since I'm going to be higher on Budo here than you. I'm probably going to be in the 20s on him. So I don't really like the St. Louis bats, and the Met bats just don't excite me much either. So this is just going to be real low ownership offensively, and then Budo for me. So I think Budo's the best play in this game.
Yeah, my problem with Budo remains the same that it's always been, just an enormously high walk rate. He's almost he's walking 5 guys per 9 innings pitched, amounts to what, a 14% walk rate, which has been a regular problem for him. Those aren't the guys that I like to play in general, and I won't, but I do get, it's not a slight at all stats. It seems like most of your plays are on team totals, strikeout props, which honestly is, like I said, not a slight. It's those numbers are there for a reason.
Right.
And I just have a little bit different approach where I just don't trust him as a pitcher, but I totally get it. Picking on this Cardinals team is something I want to do. What about you, man? Going break the tie. Me and Stats on Budo and Mikolas.
Budo versus Mikolas. Man, I'm not a Miles.
Well, neither of us are playing Mikolas, so it's more break the tie on Budo.
The reason I would take Budo is I just think the upside's higher, and I think Mikolas sucks and has no upside, and Budo at least has upside, and at least he gets to go against the Cardinals, who everyone overrates all the time. For me, on big slates, I just kind of X off the Cardinals. Like, I don't know. They've just been a brutal team in general. I'm going to X them off, I think, here as well. I'm not even
Cardinals like once this entire year.
Yeah.
And I played a lot of lineups. I just not.
And I'm not even getting them right now, but as I make adjustments, I still don't want them, right? So I'm going to make sure to do that. So I think this game for me is a full-on fade, DC.
Makes sense. That's more or less my approach to this one. I do think stacking against Miles Mikolas in general is going to be one of those things that proves to be more and more profitable as he kind of ages out of this league. I don't think he's long for MLB, and he is a guy that I do want to have action against in general. That's Miles Mikolas. Let's get to Cleveland and Atlanta next. I think maybe the best hitting environment on the slate. It's not perfect, wind blowing in Atlanta, but it is going to be 75 degrees, humid, which helps the ball fly. And we do have, at least on the Brave side, I think the highest total on the slate's in at 5.4 runs for the Braves against Logan Allen and the Guardians bullpen. Chris Sale will pitch on the other side for Atlanta. I've been pretty high on Chris Sale this year. He's been pretty good. Putting up 20 fantasy points per game so far, despite just kind of average matchups, I would say, for him. He's faced Arizona, Texas, and Philly, which are tough, and then a really good matchup against Miami, which ironically was his worst start of the year. But I am a believer in Chris Sale right now. I do think there is more, upside in the tank than he's shown us in terms of the fantasy results. I don't love picking on this Guardians team, but I do like playing lefties much more against them than I do right-handed pitchers. So I like Chris Sale some here. No interest in Logan Allen for me. And as always, Stats, the Braves near the top of my list. I know It's been arguably a disappointing start for their offense, but they're still like second or third in the runs in the league in runs scored, WRC plus, whatever stat you want to look at, despite relatively slow starts for Acuna, Riley. I would say, Olsen has had a relatively slow start. They do get Albies back, who missed the last 10 days or so with a toe injury. So, Friday nights, it's kind of a tradition here to load up on the Braves. Seems like they're somehow always at home on Friday night, and they are my number one overall stack tonight. Stats, throw it over to you. Sale, Logan, Braves, Guardians. What do you got for us?
Well, first, offensively, listen, the Braves are always obviously going to be in play, and you mentioned Albie's coming back, 4,900. He hasn't been that cheap. I don't know if he's been that cheap all year. So that's something that's of pretty good interest, I think, for us here at second base. So, and then when you look at some of the high price second basemen, on the slate, you get like a Betts or, who's maybe we don't want to touch against Bassett. That looks like a pretty good spot right there, I think, for Albies. But Sale for me, you say you've been on Sale. Like, obviously, he's always got the potential for a lot of strikeouts, but I don't know. Sale just never does it for me. I look at the market today. He's projected for 6.4 and 6.4 at the 9,300 for a guy who I just feel like against a team that doesn't really strike out all that much, and a guy who does have the ability to give up some hits and have runs scored on. Now they're projecting Cleveland to be one of the worst scoring teams on the slate when you look at the team total. So I'm a little conflicted here. So, I'll have more Sale than I probably want to.
I think this is a sneaky good matchup for Sale.
The projections are good. If you go strictly on projections, like you're going to get a lot of ownership. I just don't feel comfortable being up at like in the mid. I'm probably going to want to restrain my Sale ownership down in the 15 to 20% range, which I think will be under. Where are they looking at on Saber for his ownership?
I'm pulling it up now.
Yeah, they got him at 17. So I'm okay with that. Like if I'm 15 to 20, I'm cool with that. If he's going to be higher owned, even better. But I think that's the range that I would feel comfortable with Sale. To me, there's just better options tonight, and I would much rather pay up for Burns than have Sale.
Yeah, I agree with that last statement. I definitely prefer Burns over Sale. He will be, 2 or 3 times as owned as Sale is. So, I'm a little higher on Sale certainly than Stats is. What about you, Mangone? What do you see here between the Braves and the Guardians?
Yeah, so Braves are a team I think I want to be well over on today for sure. Now, Logan Allen, he's not really a guy like wanted to target a lot this year, but when you have a juggernaut like the Braves offense, I know they haven't really been as good as we've been hoping this year, but I think you have to like him for sure here. So I definitely like this Braves team 1 through 9. It's hard to argue with them. Really good team to play. Chris Sale's the big question of what they do with, right? Because Chris Sale on this slate, we talked about there's some really good pitchers that you could spend up on. I think Chris Sale's definitely in that conversation, but the Guardians are not a team that strike out a ton. I still think on a 13-game slate, I don't think Chris Sale is going to be like, you're not looking at like a 40% on Chris Sale or one of those egregious numbers, where I still think you can bet on the pitcher, even though the matchup's tough, and hope for that huge strikeout upside game. Another thing too with the Guardians, at least we'll say, is sure, they're not a team that strikes out a lot. Are they a team that damages you a lot with like home runs and hurts you a ton? They swing the bats faster, like they don't walk a ton. It's just one of those teams that I think the upside is too good to pass up on at the ownership. So I'll be overweight on Chris Sale. He'll definitely be a pitcher that I want to have a lot of. And I'm going to want a lot of these expensive pitchers today. I think it's a really good spot for pitching, where I thought you could make the argument yesterday that it was a really good spot for pitching, where I wanted to mix and match a lot of those studs. And I feel similar here. Like Corbin Burns, I definitely want to be my number one guy, but I want to be well overweight on Chris Sale. And I do want to be overweight on this Braves offense. Again, I know it won't be easy. They're expensive, but with MME, I'll be able to get overweight on the Braves for sure with some of the cheap pitchers I'll be looking at.
Yeah, I agree with most of that, Mangone. Alex, can't you run on Sale? I think the jury's kind of out on that one, at least for me. He did allow 8 stolen bases in 100 innings last year for Boston, but so far in the 24 and 2/3 innings he's pitched, hasn't allowed a single stolen base. Throws from the left side, which typically does limit steals in general. So I'm not saying you can't run on him, but he's not a target of mine right now for stolen bases. And then our guy P. 10 pinch hit risk on Atlanta. One of the nice things about Atlanta is they very, very rarely pinch hit. I would actually say Adam Duvall, who's hitting in the 9 hole today, is, not saying they won't pitch hit anyone else, but he's the only one that I would be at all concerned about. Jared Kelenic probably comes in the game when the Guardians get a righty in there. But I would say in general, the Braves are the team that I would project for the least pinch hitting opportunities on this entire slate. So that certainly increases my interest in them overall. That's Atlanta and the Cleveland Guardians. Certainly an interesting game there. We got to pick the show up. I'm going to keep you guys here all night. Tampa Bay, Chicago White Sox up next. Chris Flexen, Zach Eflin on the hill. I'll keep this one quick. I think Eflin is an awesome play against the White Sox. I think most pitchers who have talent are going to be an awesome play against the White Sox. No interest in Flexen. Not particularly interested in the Tampa Bay bats either. So quick one for me. Stats, throw it over to you. White Sox, Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of keep it moving. You've got a few dollars cheaper here on Eflin compared to Sale. I still think Sale outscores him, but I think with the lower ownership, I don't mind the play here getting on Eflin.
I think Eflin is safer. I just think Sale has much more upside.
Definitely more upside. I would agree with. Yeah, I would totally agree with you. And especially with like they don't go deep in the games typically. Although he's gotten 6 innings, which I guess is deep in baseball these days.
But Tampa doesn't have quite the luxury that they've had in past years. I think they kind of need Eflin to go deep as long as he can.
Yeah. So and he's been. I mean, it doesn't get much more consistent than like 5 strikeouts. For like 4 or 5 games in a row, and then 6 strikeouts his last game. He's projected for 5.4 in the market. I agree. Like he's not going to get you the double-digit strikeouts where Sale could pop off for like 11 or 12 potentially on a great night. I don't think he'll do that either here tonight. But the upside is on the Sale side. But you're going to get a little less ownership on Eflin. I think the interesting part of the game here is the bats for Tampa. I love the Tampa stacks tonight, and so I'll be playing quite a bit of that. You've got, the lineup came out after. I think the lineup came out here after after we started this. But you got a couple of cheap options. Mead's batting in the 6 hole, 2,600. Some of the so yeah, I mean you've got a lot of guys in that high 3K range. Ramirez at 3,700. I like. I like basically the middle of this lineup looks really strong to me. All 2 through 6. I think looks really good. And I mean, Yandy Diaz at 4,800, fine as well. But I really like the meat and the middle of this lineup for stacks tonight. I think Tampa is going to be one of my favorite stacks.
Yeah, I'm going to backtrack a little bit and say I'm in on Tampa as well. Flexen hasn't been good. White Sox bullpen is bad. And it's just the hitting environment that has me a little bit lower on the Mangone. I mean, 50 degrees in Chicago, winds blowing in, not super exciting, but yeah, this White Sox team bad enough that I think you can target them anyway. Where do you stand, Mangone, White Sox and Rays?
Yeah, DC gets mad when I don't take a stand sometimes, but I'm definitely taking a stand here. I'm not playing the Rays much, like really not. Like they feel similar to the Twins as me yesterday. And listen, I took my L a little bit about the Twins and how good they did, but to be fair to my counterpoint, they weren't the top offense. I'm fine with the Rays as like one-offs and stuff and mini stacks, but I just think they're overowned. I think they're one of those overowned offenses today, and there's other offenses that I would rather get to. So I'm not going to be as high on Tampa. Sure, I'll have them mixed in as one-offs and mini stacks a little bit, but 5-mans, I definitely want to not steer completely clear, but steer pretty far away. Like I think it's a better slate. Like I'm going to be low on Tampa. I think it's a big stand for me on this slate. I think a lot of people want to play them because they see the White Sox. They see a 3-22 team, and I get it. But Chris Flexen, counterpoint for him, I watched him a lot with the Mets. So did you, John. He isn't. Yes, he's not the best pitcher. He's more of a journeyman, bounce around the league. But he does.
I like that you're already backtracking before you even make your case for Chris.
So he has upside though, right? I'm not saying play him, but he can find his way out of jams at times. And just with a chalky offense, I don't like it. Like, I think and especially with the weather, you said, DC, we're taking a chalky offense on a 13-game slate in 50-degree weather.
You say chalky, man, going to you. So Sabre has all the Rays below 7%. Do you think they're going to come in higher than that?
I mean, when I use the Sabre stuff, I'm getting a lot more of them. So maybe I'm wrong. I mean, again, it's a 13-game slate. I'm probably being a little ridiculous with saying it, but that's just the way I've been playing baseball is on these offenses that pop more for me. I just get lower on them. And everyone loves to stack against the White Sox, right? They just do. And if we look at this Tampa Bay team, I mean, they're kind of cheap, but let's just double check what the lineup is. So the lineup is, the bottom of the order is cheap enough where you can mix guys in.
I hate this Rays lineup. It's part of the reason why I don't really want to play him.
I do too. I mean, it's definitely not as cheap of an offense as I was saying, but I think they're going to have more ownership than I would like. And again, it's a 13-game slate. It's different context than it being a 6 or 8 game, slate where they cut slates up on like a Saturday. But for me, Tampa's going to be a team I'm lower on. That's one team I'm definitely lower on, and Miami's another team I'm just going to be very low on because I just think a lot of people are gravitating towards them. And I think they're gravitating towards them because they want to jam in some of these really good pitchers for sure. Yes, there's one value pitcher that we'll get to shortly, but I just think this is a game that's coming over-owned in my opinion.
Makes sense. That's Tampa Bay and Chicago White Sox. Cincinnati, Texas are up next. Nathan Eovaldi pitching for the Rangers, coming off a bit of a rough start against the Braves. Personally not holding that against him too much. I guess he wasn't great against Houston either, but has been some tough matchups for Eovaldi over the last two. I do think he's a pretty good option here against the Reds. Graham Ashcraft pitching for Cincinnati. It's been pretty solid so far. He's a weird pitcher, one that I personally have a hard time getting a handle on. He throws like 100 mile per hour and like a 96 mile per hour cutter, and it seems like he should be much better than he is. This one in Texas, not Cincinnati, so not the great ballpark bump that you would maybe hope for. Stats over to you. Ashcraft, Eovaldi, Rangers, and Reds.
Eovaldi is one guy I kind of like or like quite a bit tonight. You're looking at his prop here for strikeouts. They're projecting it out about 7.2 Ks. So that puts him up in the gallon range and just a half a strikeout below Burns. And you're getting that at a much cheaper price of 8,600. So I like Eovaldi quite a bit. I think you got a ton of upside. Cincinnati. All right. They're not where they rank here. Yeah, no, they're 27th. And I think they're third worst against righties strikeouts. So I think a lot of things point to the potential for a big game for Eovaldi. And so that's where I'm going tonight. I think I'm trying to remember where the ownership was on Eovaldi. They had 15%. So I think you want to be double that. I think you can get up to the 30% on Eovaldi. I like being there. It's enough of a savings that's going to get you. Again, I think basically Mangone was talking about it. We could fade the top stacks here today, and I think we could fade some of the top pitching just because there's so many different ways this slate can go. So I don't mind going down to Eovaldi, being up on being double the market on him, using some of that ownership that you were going to use on Burns and maybe some of these other guys that are in the 9K plus range. Sale for me, take some of your ownership off of Sale and move it over to Eovaldi, and then the Imanaga, right? So I think those are the kind of the two guys where you could really differentiate yourself a bit at pitching and then play whichever stacks you like. But I'm going to be high on Eovaldi tonight. As far as the bats go in this game, I have quite a bit of interest on the Texas side. Love Nate Lowe. He's going to be one of my favorite players on the day. Quite possibly should make my core core lineup. So Nate Lowe is going to be one of my higher owned guys, and really just the top of this lineup. I mean, not that I'm playing the bottom of the lineup light. I'm going to be right around 10+% on the bottom of the lineup, but I'm really hammering the top of this lineup quite a bit. And I'm going to, even though I know it's one of the more popular stacks of the day, I'm going to try to get over on them, and that's kind of how I'm playing it today.
Eovaldi makes a lot of sense to me. I was probably too low on him writing the article. And I do think there's something to be said, Mangone, for a team like Cincinnati who, man, I don't even have the number, but it seems like they've played like all their games at Great American Ballpark this year. It just seems like they've been at home all year long. Now they go to a dome. It's a big park shift, a negative park shift, of course, but just – I don't know. I could see Cincinnati just kind of going down in flames tonight against the Eovaldi. So I'm going to side with stats on this one. I think we want some Eovaldi. 8,600, very fair price point. Still throwing gas. I know the last two starts haven't been great. This does seem like a pretty good bounce back spot for him. What about you, Mangone? Where do you stand? Reds and Rangers. And real quick, we are giving away those two $121 tickets. I got to say, Lycan, I think he's locked up that first one with the picture of what your actual room looks like, not with the grand piano in the background, which I can't really insult you too much. I got a picture of the mountains here instead of my actual room for a reason. But I think Lycan has locked in the first one. There's been some good submissions for the second, but I do think that second $121 ticket is, open to be won still. But anyway, over to you, Mangone. What do you see between the Reds and the Rangers?
Yeah, I think I read the Lycan entry, and I agree. Lycan with a great entry there, so he definitely lock up the one.
It's hard to make me crack up during the show, but he did it, and I think that's deserving of a ticket right there.
Yeah, definitely deserving. So speaking of deserving, Nathan Eovaldi is deserving today. I think he's going to be one of the better pitchers on this slate. 8,600 against the Reds. I always like to talk about there's teams that just strike out a lot. The Reds are a team that strike out a lot. It's a simple equation. Nathan Eovaldi's too cheap. It's a good buy low spot. Give me some Nathan Eovaldi. I want to be overweight on him. I do think I want to be overweight on this Texas offense still. I think they're a good play. I know I talked about some of these higher owned offenses being a little bit lower on. Well, Texas is what I'm still fine with, right? I'm going to eat it with Texas and call it a day. I think they're a really good team today. Also, Nathaniel Lowe, only 3.8K. He is a guy that his price is going to hike up as the season goes on. So I think this is a really good offensive target. So yeah, I like this game. It's just a full-on Texas onslaught and fade the Reds.
I can tell when you're annoyed at the length of the show, when your pace of voice picks up just a little bit, Mangone. You're normally a fast talker, but you get even more going. So
I got the Bucks on the other screen, right? So I'm antsy to watch. I'll say that.
That makes sense. Yankees and Brewers up next. Colin Rea and Luis Gil. Luis Gil, one of my kind of breakout pitchers coming into the year, delivered for us absolutely last time out against the Tampa Bay Rays with 32 DraftKings points. I don't like him quite as much in this matchup stats. I think he's definitely in play at that price point. He's again, if you watch me shows, talk a lot about him. That big fastball can neutralize any lineup, including this one. But I don't like Rea as much as Eovaldi, Sale, Burns. So a little bit lower on my list. Still definitely in play. No interest in Rea. And then it would be the Yankees side offensively that I like in this game. What about you, Stats? Yankees and Brewers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think we both liked Hill last week on the Sunday show, and he came through big time. We said, ton of upside. He's going to have that kind of upside pretty much every time he steps on the mound. The
downside as well, but what we're really chasing on a big slate is upside, I think.
That's it. But he's got that, right? He could give you the big K numbers.
Yep.
How many innings he's going to throw, and really the control has been the biggest factor here, and that kind of brings his pitch count up. So I think that kind of caps him a bit, but I do think he's got to be in he's got to be in the mix for you tonight. He's definitely in my 150. I'll be in the 10-15% range. I agree with you on Rea. Now, as far as the bats go, I think we could get some relatively low owned Yankee bats just because of the price, and they're always going to be potentially in play. Like now, you've talked about it in the past. I do like a lot of the one-offs in the Yankee lineup, if you're gonna use them as a single in your lineup, just because they've got so much power. So there's quite a few guys in the Yankees lineup and Yankee stacks for sure that I'll be playing. You got to pay up to get up to a Soto, but Judge at 5,900. I'm going to have a decent amount of Rizzo batting fourth at 3,900. I think you have to like. So I think getting overweight the Yankee bats might not be a terrible play here tonight. And he'll, again, some upside there at a decent price, 7,800. Don't like much at all on either side of the Milwaukee game.
Makes sense to me. Agree with almost all that. Mangon, what about you? What do you see in this game?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with stats. Like the Yankees were one of the offenses when I was like running stuff and making adjustments throughout this show. I was like, I want more Yankees. Why am I not getting more Yankees? And some of it is I probably got to make some adjustments setting wise on my end. But once I make those adjustments, I think I'll be able to get it in there, and I want to get them on my team. So Colin Rea is definitely someone I'm willing to target. One thing we'll call out too, Milwaukee, they've been like an absolute just monster this year, but they're going against Luis Gil. Now, Luis Gil, he can walk guys, but the strikeout rate is just so strong. I think I want to bet on Gil over the Brewers, but I could see, like, if you told me the Brewers won a GVP tonight, I wouldn't be shocked, right? That's all I'm going to say. Like, for instance, if you're looking at maybe pitchers on this slate.
The Brewers are weird where you look at their numbers against righties and they stand out. And then you look at like the individual lineup and you're like, who in this lineup do I actually like really fear? Yeah. Not really anybody. I mean, William Contreras swinging a great bat, but like other than that, I don't know.
It makes no sense, but just hear me out for a second. If I told you, if you looked at the ownerships on today's slate, right? Like at pitcher, right? Corbin Burns, highest owned pitcher. Zach Gallen, he's going to be the next one probably. Bailey Ober. Do you want to play the not the Oakland Athletics, the Los Angeles Angels? I mean, I'm not racing to play the Angels on this slate. That's just my opinion in LA. Then you have Luis Gil going against Milwaukee. You got Sale against Cleveland. Evaldi against the Reds. Eflin against the White Sox. Like, if I had to pick an offense to use as a leverage play on this slate to attack a pitcher that could be a little bit higher owned, and Gil at 7,800 is going to get ownership, and I think he gets steamed, and I think Bailey Ober does. I think those are the two value pitchers that get steamed up a little bit. Maybe Evaldi, but again, he's 8,600. It's not as much value. I'm just saying, if you were playing 50 teams to 100 teams and you had a couple Milwaukee teams, I don't think it's the craziest idea for leverage with what we've seen them do this year. That's all. So, but I do like Gil. I think it's a spot where he is going to be a good value to get exposure to. And then Yankees are a team that I think are getting under-owned that I want to be more over-owned today.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I do like Luis Gil here. I do also think he is prone to get blown up basically any start. I think he's just kind of a true wild card type of pitcher. Let's get over to the West Coast. We jump an hour and a half in terms of the start time here. Minnesota and the LA Angels, 65 degrees in LA, winds blowing out to right field, strong winds. Ballpark Pal, which I do really trust for kind of weather predictions, doesn't still have this game as being super hitter friendly, but I wouldn't be surprised if this game goes over that 8 total. It's essentially a pick 'em via the odds, but Bailey Ober, again, pitcher I like. I do think he's absolutely in play at 6,800. He's also one of the most fly ball heavy pitchers in the entire league stats, which does kind of like or have me on these Angels bats a little bit. Of course, Mike Trout leading the way, but Taylor Ward, Sano, Adele, they got some real power in that lineup. You can get up in the air against Bailey Ober, and given the wind conditions, I could see it sailing over the wall a little bit. So I like this Angels team as a contrarian stack, and kind of the same thing for the Twins. Patrick Sandoval, not a pitcher I'm super high on. So, yeah, Ober's too cheap at 6,800, but I do still like kind of both sides of this one just because Ober's cheap, but then I do think he could give up some home runs here. So I'm more looking at bats here, honestly, but where do you stand stats on Twins and Angels?
Yeah, kind of like what you're thinking there. I mean, Ober 6,800. You're right. Totally. That's just too cheap a price when you look at his projected strikeout 6.1 when you figure Sale's at 6.4, Bassett's at 6.1, right? So for that price, he's at 6.1 and Sandoval's at 6. So they're expecting strikeouts from both of these pitchers. But as you said, I'm looking at the weather. I'm seeing 20 miles per hour going out to right center field. I don't know if that's kind of the same thing that you're seeing. So
same thing. I'm seeing multiple sites. So it does look like that's,
So I kind of like, you're going to get some ownership on Ober. And I agree with you. I think this is a potential spot to get some leverage on the field with the Angel bats. So I like the Angel bats a bit more than, say, the Minnesota side of the game. But the Minnesota side of the game I like, but just as far as from a game theory standpoint, I think the Angel side is a side where if you're playing one lineup or three lineups and you want to just get a different stack, in there, I think the Angels potentially are that team where you could play some cheap options and mix them in there, obviously with the only real two big bats that they have, and maybe differentiate yourself a bit. But Sandoval, I'm gonna have a small number on both. I'm gonna probably be under the market on both these pitchers. I am going to play them just because their strikeout numbers are pretty high relative to their price. But I think both of these stacks are in play, and with that wind blowing out, you never know. This game could pop off. So I think you want to get a piece of it.
It's just a weird dynamic where I would probably have less interest in the Angels bats if Ober was higher priced, but because he's lower priced and going to be owned, the Angels bats are going to be low owned. And as we talked about, the wind conditions look really favorable. I'm looking at the Angels ownership, Mangone. They've got Saber has Mangone Miguel Sano at 3.5%, and then all the other Angels under 2%, including Mike Trout. Against a fly ball pitcher and in wind blown out conditions, I'm not honestly that great of a hitting slate, right? Like there's no offense today that I feel is just gonna nuke for sure. Yeah, these Angels growing on me a little bit. Sounds like Stats is a little bit of the same way. What about you, man? Going Angels and Twins here.
Yeah, you guys have definitely sold me more on the Angels than I was saying before when I was talking about the Brewers. I think with the win and everything, I have to consider that a little bit. And like I said, I think Ober is going to be a high-owned pitcher on the slate. Like the other day, I know I've talked to JT about this a bit, but like the other day when that pitcher for the Twins pitched, I had at least one White Sox sack, right? I had like 15 teams on DK, and I did one White Sox sack, and it wasn't like.
Sometimes you have to look inward and be like, if you got a 2% owned Mike Trout in this game, trying to chase down a GPP, you're going to feel pretty damn good about that, right? Like win or lose.
Yeah, and the team that I looked at that I had, it was one of those, it had like Wheeler and those stud pitchers, and then it had Eloy Jimenez, it had Gavin Sheets, Andrew Vaughn, a punt catcher, and like, I think it was Paul DeJong. And it's like, when I looked at the team, I was like, okay, this team isn't that bad, right? And then it had some interesting like mini stack that was like a really expensive mini stack that other people couldn't grab. So I do think you have to make a case for this Angels team because of some of the stuff that we're talking about here. You get Nolan Schanuel, I'm probably saying his name wrong, but he's 3.3K at first base, right? I definitely butchered his name pretty bad. You got Miguel Sano at 3.6. You talk about Brandon Drury at 3.8. Like, this isn't a bad offense at no ownership. So I'm with you guys on that. Now, DC, I was in the Discord chat yesterday making fun of the Twins, and I ran projections, and it looks like people are playing the Twins again today against Patrick Sandoval. And I will say, I don't like Patrick Sandoval. Patrick Sandoval is a guy that's a very up and down pitcher. He is someone that you can make the argument on a lot of slates. You could say, you could have 5 to 10% Sandoval and then play the Twins also. Like you could make that argument with the wind blowing out and with the price tags on these Twins. Manny Margot is 2.7, Miranda 2.8. Santana, 2.9, Martin, 2.4, Vasquez, 2.3, Farmer, 2.2, and Willie Castro, 2.6. What do I do with the Twins here, DC? Because I want to fade them as 5-mans and maybe play them as minis and maybe one-offs because of what they can do for my full lineup in a good spot, but maybe I'm wrong. Sell me on the Twins here, DC.
They're the cheapest lineup overall today. And obviously hitting conditions that we like against a bad pitcher, so I'm not on the Twins, really, but I do totally get it. I will say Margot, Miranda, Martin, Farmer are all pretty significant pinch hit risks. They do have, in my opinion, their three best hitters, all lefties on the bench: Julian, Kirilloff, and Larnach, waiting to come into this game. And those guys will come into this game when a right-hander comes in. So I would be a little bit careful with the Twins. That's enough to kind of keep me off them personally. But I do get it. Sandoval, pitcher to target in general. They're cheap, good hitting environment. I'd probably just go into the other side of this game, especially given the lower ownership. But that's Twins and Angels. Three more games to talk about. Arizona, Seattle, trying to keep a movie here. Low total in this one. Emerson Hancock, Zach Gallen on the hill. Really, Stats the only player in this game that I'm, considering having much ownership on is Zach Gallen pitching for the Diamondbacks. No interest in Hancock. Really don't like much of either of these stacks, but tell me where you're at, Stats, Diamondbacks and Mariners.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is pretty much just Gallen. That's it. And just a matter of how much you're going to go. 7.2 is his strikeout projection if you look in the betting markets. So, it's up there, but Eovaldi's at 7.2 as well. So I kind of like pivoting off there and saving the salary, going down to an Eovaldi. I don't mind. Certainly, if I was playing one lineup, I wouldn't have either of the top two pitchers in here today. I think he's going to probably be the second or third highest owned guy. I think Sabersom's got him as the second highest. I think you can fade both of the top pitchers. Not that I dislike him. I just think we've got some better options here and differentiate yourself. We can get two relatively low owned pitchers in the 10 to 20% range. And maybe one sub that'll be in the winner of the big GPPs tonight. So I think we're looking in that 7 to 9K range. Again, that tends to be the good spot for GPPs. But Gallen, listen, it's a great spot. You got a team that strikes out a ton in Seattle. So I mean, I get it. But the 10K price tag, I think, is just a little too much when you look at some of the other pitchers on the slate. Just too good a pitching slate to pay up the 10K for me. Obviously, I'm going to have them in my GPPs in the 150 lineups that I play, but I'll be underneath the market on them.
Yeah, we have essentially the same take on Gallen, me and Stats. I just don't think he's quite a 10K pitcher right now, and there's a bunch of pitchers that I like. He's going to be owned, so I will be under the field with Stats on Zach Gallen. If you're on him, honestly, I'm not really trying to talk you off of playing Zach Gallen, anybody, but just not where I'm going personally. What about you, man, going Arizona and Seattle here?
Yeah, I mean, this game feels pretty simple to me. I'm going to fade the bats completely. And then the question is, what do I do with Gallen? For me, I've talked about a lot of pitchers that I like, and I haven't really made a lot of adjustments on the projections on my end yet and ran everything. But what I'm noticing is I think I'll have some Gallen, but it'll be lower than some of the other guys I talked about. Like, I like those pitchers better. Right now, when I run projections, I'm getting more Gallen than those other guys, but I'm just going to flip it. Stats, I think you've talked about this before. Just like flip the projection around sometimes on these pitchers. And I think that's what I'm going to do here. Like maybe I flip Gallen and, the Cubs pitcher. I don't want to butcher his name, but that's something that I might consider doing. And I'll still get some of Gallen, I'm sure, but I just think there's better pitchers that we can get over on. And I think Gallen's a little over-owned compared to some of these other pitchers who are under him.
Makes sense. Let's get to the last two games. We'll do a little abbreviated fun section at the end, but first let's talk about Philadelphia and San Diego. Looks like we have the Padres lineup. I'm not sure if we have the Phillies lineup yet. Joe Musgrove, Aaron Nola on the hill, two veteran right-handers. Nola did have his first big game of the season, or he's had two good games in a row, but they have come against the White Sox and the Rockies, so a little bit of a grain of salt there. Go against the Padres here. I really don't have much interest in 10.3K Nola myself, and I've been fading Musgrove all year. That has generally worked out pretty well. So I'm not playing a lot from this game, Stats. I do think these pitchers will get a little bit of ownership, but not for me. What about you, Padres and Phillies?
Yep, don't love the game either. Musgrove, I'll have a little bit more Musgrove than Nola, but not much. I'm going to be in the low single.
Nola's kind of in like the Gallen camp, right? Where you should be fine, but
I think it's worse. I don't know. I mean, you look at when you look at the
Agreed.
betting markets. I mean, you're paying more for him. He's only projected for 5.1 Ks in this game. Like, I'm not paying 10,300 for a guy projected at 5.1 Ks. So, yeah, you're right. Had two pretty good starts back to back here. This is a much better lineup though than he's facing. I mean, he played, arguably the two worst lineups in baseball in his last two. So I'm not expecting much. I think it's an easy fade, and there's not going to be much on the market. There's not a game theory play. The game theory play would be to play Nola. I just don't see it. I just think there's some other options here that are better. So I would pass. Don't feel obligated to play Musgrove. I'm just throwing him in just to have him a few lineups with him in my 150. But if I was playing 20 max, anything short of that, I'm not touching either one of these pitchers. And I don't really like the bats all that much in this game either. Tatis is always going to be a guy that you're going to have as a one-off type option on your in your lineups. But other than that, don't really love either side of this game.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Is there a scenario where you're over the field? Well, I did lock in Albert Suarez the other day on 100% of my lineup. So, yes, there are scenarios where we do go over the field. And also, by definition, of course, there are. But I do personally like to take some bold stands myself, and that means I will be under the field oftentimes on a lot of the chalk. Over to you, man, going quickly. Philadelphia, San Diego.
Yes, I agree on the over the field. I talked about Washington as a team I'll be over the field on. I talked about teams I'm absolutely fading that I'm under the field on. So there's definitely teams that we're taking stands on. Yankees is one that I want to get over the field on for sure. This game is a team I am full fading. You want to take their fade. I don't want any of this game. I don't see any of these options really popping up for me. So I'm fading this one.
All right, that's Philadelphia and San Diego. Last game of the night, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, another game that I suspect will be a lower owned game for all of us. Kyle Harrison, decent Giants pitcher. I do think he's in play against this Pirates team, a pitcher that I do like in general. 8,400, I think is a fair price point. He does have some strikeout upside. He is my favorite player in this game overall, frankly, by a decent margin. Quinn Priester will pitch for the Pirates. I think you could stack against him. He really hasn't been good at the MLB level. Giant stacks. Kyle Harrison seemed like decent plays, but I won't be going crazy on this game myself. What about you, Stats?
Yeah, I mean, the pitching in this game don't really love. I think you can go with the I think you can make some San Francisco stacks though, and maybe be over. I'm not sure where the market's going to be on San Francisco. But,
I assume pretty low.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. I mean, getting in on San Francisco bats. We don't have that lineup as of yet, so it's going to be tough to really pinpoint who it is because they could get. There's a couple of different ways that they could go with their lineup, but I'm looking at that as being a one of those that I'm kind of bumping up. We talked about earlier in the show. I'm kind of spreading it out with my stacks today. I'm not. Typically, I like to go a little heavy on a couple of stacks, not the way I'm going today. So some of these stacks that are going to be lesser owned, that's where I'm going to be over the market on. I think San Francisco is going to come into that category tonight. So I think I'll have a decent amount over the market on San Francisco.
Your thoughts here, man, going? Giants and Pirates?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything from this game. I just want to triple check. I mean, you could make a case for like Kyle Harrison. But I don't know, part of me just feels like it'll just turn into Evaldi shares. But I think that's really it for me.
We'll go quick on the next segment. We'll just go favorite stack, favorite pitcher, favorite hitter. I will go first. My overall favorite stack on this game, or on the slate rather, going to be the Atlanta Braves against Logan Allen. Favorite pitcher for me, might end up being Chris Sale. I think we're going to see a big outing for him against this Guardians team. And then favorite overall hitter, we will go with Mr. Juan Soto against Colin Rea and the Brewers. Stats, favorite stack, pitcher, and overall favorite hitter for you.
Right. So my favorite stack is going to be Texas. And then are we doing the sneakies? If we're doing the sneaky stack, I would say I'm going to go with San Francisco. Favorite pitcher, Eovaldi. And again, don't sleep on Imanaga. Just that steam is screaming at me. And my favorite hitter is going to be Nate Lowe. I think it's going to be my highest owned hitter. That price in middle of the lineup on a stack that I like. I'm going with Nate Lowe tonight.
Love it. Mangone, over to you. Favorite stack, favorite pitcher, favorite hitter. You're muted.
Mangone, you're on mute, bud.
Sorry, Damian Lillard went to the locker room, so I was trying to figure out what was going on. But anyways.
We're like an hour and 20 minutes into the show, so
I know. Well, as someone with an under on Bobby Portis, I'm a little tilted if it's a bad knee injury, right? I mean, it's going to be free Bobby Portis, and I'll lose my money. So, but anyways, pitcher, Corbin Burns is the best pitcher on the slate, but the guy that I'm going to be overweight on, that's going to be like a stand, that's going to be important to me is Nasty Nate, Nate Eovaldi. I'll be on him. Offense that I really like, Yankees will be one I really want to be overweight on today. I also want to be overweight on the Nationals, so that's a second one for you, maybe more of a lower owned one. And then my play of the day will go with CJ Abrams. A little expensive, but dude has been on fire, and I want to keep riding it out.
Well, that's it for this Friday night fireworks show. We appreciate all you guys watching. No Saturday MLB show, but we will be back as always on Sunday morning, I believe. Travis, you'll be joining me on Sunday morning talking baseball, and hopefully we'll see some RPS logos up at the top tonight. That'll do it for us. For Statsational, for Mr. Sweet Travis Mangone, I'm DC. We're out of here.